It's easier to be negative than positive. And I feel like we all have a habit of when somebody is doing something that we don't ourselves enjoy, when they are improving themselves by utilizing that thing, we tend to go, ugh. Welcome to Velvet Ventures,
where we talk about life, marriage, and the pursuit of entrepreneurship.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Channing. This episode is brought to you by Mingle Business Networking. Are you ready to expand your business network and make meaningful connections? Look no further than Mingle Business Network. And we can personally say how great of a benefit they are, especially for small businesses. We attend them personally. In fact, we even lead a few of the chapters, so we hope to see you there. For more information about Mingle, you can check out the link below this episode. So this time we're actually going to talk about reading.
Yes, welcome back to part 2 of our ADD getting the best of us, talking about reading, which is why sometimes I think it's hard for me to read, because then I get thinking about other things. Especially if I'm reading about something interesting.
Yeah. Because
then my mind starts thinking about the things that I'm reading, and then next thing I know, it's been 10 minutes and I've read like 3 pages, but I don't remember any of it because I've been daydreaming.
Yeah. So why don't we go over like what kind of books we like?
Okay. Nonfiction.
Which, tell us what that is. Tell me what that is.
Fiction, I always say it this way, fiction is false. Nonfiction means non-false. And by false, I just mean this is a novel, this is made up, this is a story, not based on, facts. This isn't 100% true.
Yeah.
So...
And even though he says it that way every time, I still never remember.
Yeah. I try to give her that analogy of non-false or false. Fiction is false, but it does not stick.
Mm-mm.
But
it's like when he tries to explain to me the speed of the internet.
Yep.
Don't understand it. But
so we enjoy typically non-fiction, and I think we enjoy parables, but not novels.
Yeah. No, I don't read novels.
We watch TV for that kind of thing.
Yeah. I watch garbage TV and
to make
applicable books.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we like, I like biographies. I like books on, I don't like the word self-help, but self-development maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Finance. History, mindset,
Christian books.
Yeah, things of that nature. That basically, what's going to help you get better, and how do you books that help you?
I like marketing and economics.
Yeah, like economics, but things that are going to help you either understand the world in which you are operating or that you want to be operating in, and also why do we think or behave the way that we do. Yeah, love human psychology and yeah.
So we never did answer how many books we think we have.
That's what got us off track last time.
Yeah, we'll stay on track this time.
Maybe.
I would think we have at least 300.
Oh yeah, I would say that. We're probably on the cusp of...
The kids' library.
Oh, well, if we're including the kids' library...
The regular library.
We're probably north of 12 to 1,500.
Yeah. We could probably technically actually be a library. You only need 979 books to qualify as an actual library and receive, government grants. Did you know that?
We get some tax credits or...
Right?
Some grants or something.
I'm pretty sure, the last time that I heard that statistic, it was only 979 books.
It's kind of like you are used to. So the town that I worked in when I first was old enough to go work outside the farm was they just beat the census by 15, 20 people to not be classified as a village, because as soon as you get beyond that number, you can now be called a town.
Gotcha. And
so I always still refer to it as the village of, but they didn't appreciate it. The people who were residents there in the village.
But yeah, I would say.
So yes, we have over 1,000. And then yes, if you throw in the kids' library and stuff, we probably have somewhere between 11 and 1,400.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have
books.
Literally a library in every room except for bathrooms. Because even the kitchen, we have a library. Yeah. And the kids don't have their books in their room.
Right.
They're in a shared hutch in the game room. Yeah. But, so, how many books would you say that you've read this year? Between audiobooks and physical books?
So, this year, I don't know, probably 18, 20 something, maybe. I could go back in my app. Month. Yeah, I could go back and look through my app and see how many I've completed. There's been a few that I've gotten like halfway through that then it kind of like, okay, it petered out. Mm-hmm. And I no longer was getting anything from it. And I thought maybe I would enjoy just the storytelling, but I didn't. So there's probably about 5 or 6 that I got, halfway through that I just decided I'm not going to spend any more time with this. Mm-hmm.
And when did you start reading to that level? Like, how long have you been reading 2 books a month?
Probably just last year and a half, 2 years. Probably 2 years, roughly. Because I got to where I was doing more audiobooks than like podcast. Well, I still did a lot of podcasts. But I was doing the books when I'd be at work, like driving to work. Driving to the office.
Do you read less now that you work from home?
Yes.
Now that there's not a commute?
Yes. Now that there's not a commute and now that I'm not sitting at like either a desk or I'm driving around to job sites or...
In the kitchen.
Yeah, back when I consumed a lot of music and podcasts when I used to work in food service and would be in the kitchen because I could get...
Which Ben was a chef.
Yeah, I could get 5 to 6 hours of podcasts in a day. So now it's a lot less. So I do enjoy whenever I do when I have to go to a job site for our handyman business because I get a little windshield therapy and get some time to listen to my podcasts or books or whatever I'm listening to. But because right now I find it hard. I just need to get better now that I am home. I need to get better about just kind of carving out. And I think I just need to start with I'm just going to carve out 20 minutes to sit down and physically read. Because if I just wait, I'll try to read at night. Mm-hmm. And then I'm laying down in bed and I'm trying to read or I'm in one of the armchairs and then I'm just starting. When the book falls and hits me in the face,
right?
I know it's time just to close it because I'm not, even whatever I am reading, I'm not going to retain it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just need to get better about that. What about you?
So I just really started reading this year. Like last year I read 3 books. And I always liked the idea of reading. Yeah. Like when I would see other people just out in public reading, I'm like, oh, they're so cool. But this year I challenged myself, and I don't do New Year's resolutions. So this is not a New Year's resolution. We were just talking about this last night. This is a new habit that I want to keep.
Yeah.
But this year I'm reading a book a week. So I've read 38 books so far this year.
And how have you done that? How have you managed to...
Some weeks I don't read any, and then I'll finish... I like reading 2 to 3 books at a time, which does help keep up with that level. But again, my ADHD and chaos-focused brain, I find that I actually retain the information better when I have multiple books going at a time. Because I'll get bored if I just read one book all the way through. So, when I take bath time, I've got 2 to 3 books on the ledge, and I read, 30 to 40 pages of each. And so there might be weeks that, because they're bigger books, I don't actually finish any. but then I'll finish 6 the next week because I was coming to the end of all these at the same time.
Right.
But I have really prioritized my reading this year, and because it's a commitment that I made to myself. Like, it's not a New Year's resolution. It's a commitment to a habit that I made this year to myself. And I have grown leaps and bounds in business ownership and communication skills and self-awareness. And so that's why I want to keep doing it, because I want to be the best version of me that I possibly can be. And books are what's helping me get there faster than just running through life. Trial and error.
Yeah.
And as a business owner, I need constant encouragement. And there's only so much encouragement from you that I'm going to believe. Yeah. Like, you're married to me. You should be my biggest cheerleader.
Right.
So when I'm really down, it helps to get outside perspective, because I know it's not biased, because they don't know me. They wrote this book 12 years ago. Because that's the other thing. I read a lot of books from like the 80s, 90s, 50s. I've read some from the 30s.
We don't run out and grab like New York Times bestsellers.
No, and typically, even though we have those on our shelves, they're not the books that I gravitate towards. Yeah. I like the old school.
I think a lot of that has to do also with I think there's a certain level of perception. Mm-hmm. I think there's a certain level of truth behind reading history. Mm-hmm. Because that's, even if, it's crazy to think, the 90s, that was 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So, it's like, there's a lot to be said about reading something from the 90s to see if it's still applicable today.
When what I find most often is, just like fashion, economics repeats itself.
Right.
And so when I read books from the 30s or 40s with marketing or with it, I actually get a lot of really great ideas that other people aren't using yet.
Right.
But the movement's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming back, I should say. And so if you can figure out what was happening and where the trend is starting to pick back up, you can actually be the trend setter or be on the front wave of that trend. Because we're coming back into the mom and pops. This wasn't the economics, platform 15 years ago. 15 years ago, people wanted Fortune 500s, and they wanted a big giant conglomerate company, and they wanted a big bolstered brand that they could trust. That's what it was about. And now people want you to be the brand. They want you to be the company. And they're kind of coming away from the larger conglomerates to find people that they connect with that happen to run companies.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot you can learn, even if the book is quote unquote old.
Right. Well, and I think that a lot of that is, everything comes back tweaked. Mm-hmm. Like what we're doing right now. This is radio. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, we're obviously nowhere near the forefront of podcasting, but it's very much how back in the 50s, 40s, 50s, before, TV was prevalent and in everybody's home, what was in everybody's home is a radio. Mm-hmm. Well, now, there's not a radio in everybody's home. What is in everybody's home? A phone. Mm-hmm. What does everybody have with them all the time? A phone. Mm-hmm. So where do you need to go to be able to talk to people? You need to go where they have the technology to listen.
Yeah.
And so what's a good format for that? Well, there used to be radio shows, but now, people don't want to be a part of a station, and they don't necessarily want to be a part of all this stuff and deal with the bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. Like you said, we're getting into mom and pop. So instead of us going on whatever KOCO blank blank, no, we make our own show. We record it in a spare room in our house, mm-hmm. and you upload it. Mm-hmm. It's just like how YouTube is to what, cable TV was. The whole nightly, people could get on that local cable channels, after 10 p.m. and they could air their own little random shows that they created in their town, and they would just air it after all the newscasters.
I immediately thought of Wayne's World.
Right. Yeah, and that's what YouTube is. It's the nighttime after 10 p.m. after the nightly news. The broadcasters, they just shut off airwaves, essentially. And you had local cable channels would just air, the locals that recorded and wanted to have a cable TV show. And so I think that's when we look at it from that perspective of it's the same thing, it's just a new, updated version.
Yeah, just a new iteration.
Right. And so, I think that that's what this is. And I think that by reading those older business books, you can you're a little more aware of when things are changing. Well, okay, so I read, this is happening now. I can attribute that to kind of what's going on here. What did people do when things were down that now they're successful? Or then they became successful afterwards? Like,
right.
What were the plays that were made? And so I think that by reading, and not just reading if it's, I know some people they will only read, novels, which is fine. But at that point, I'm like, I don't feel like we read for entertainment. We read for knowledge. We read for, expansion of thinking.
Yeah.
Because we're not super social people. We're at this junction in our life where, if you're not bringing positive energy and you're not bringing encouragement and you're not bringing, because I feel like that's what we try to deal out. And I try to be very conscious of not being negative towards people whenever they are interacting with me. And so,
well, and I think just right now with trying to grow the businesses and become the best versions of ourselves, we need a lot of focus at home right now. And so, at least for me, I don't have the emotional bandwidth to have a lot of friends.
Right.
Because I'm working really hard on me. And I'm working really hard on the business. And I'm working really hard on the family. And so, I'm spent.
Right.
So I've got some people that I communicate with on a more regular basis.
Right.
But I wouldn't say that, I don't go out and have girls' night.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that, even when you were at our other house or neighborhood, when you had your girls' night, I think there was a level of fun, but I could always tell that you were drained afterwards. Like the next day to 4 days after, that you were pretty well spent. And not 100%. You still would, get up and we'd go do stuff or whatever, but I could definitely tell that there was a portion of you that was checked out. And I think it was just because everybody was in there complaining about their husbands or complaining about their, lack of husbands or lack of this, or it just seemed like it was a lot of, and it may not have been directly negative, but there was negative tones and negative underlying energy. And I think that we both are very susceptible to when there is negativity, it can just drain you.
Well, and even when people speak about actions that they would like to take, but they're taking no actions, that's very draining and very frustrating for me. Because as a starter, I'm like, just freaking start. Who cares? Hit the wall. It's not going to hurt as bad as you think it is.
Yeah.
And so when it's the same repetitive, we're a month later and you're still talking about wanting to do the same thing, I've already started and failed at 3 things.
Right.
And so for me, it's just get off the pot.
Right. Yeah. And I think that those are just those people that
my
tolerance. All talk.
My tolerance starts taking a nosedive.
Right. Well, I think it just, you get around those people who are just all talk and there's no action. It's one thing to say, I want this result. I'm not making strides, but each day I show up and I try a little bit. And so you may not have made it yet, but you've at least taken a step forward. But whenever it's been a month or two and I still haven't started that thing that I want, well, then why are we still talking about it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, try or try not. You will fail.
Basically, my books are my friends right now. Because if a book is negative,
that sounded very nerdy.
Right. If a book is negative, I just shut it and I put it back on the shelf.
Yeah.
And I have learned a trick. So if I ever read a book, and so I was reading this book called Pushing Towards the Front. It's been read by almost every single president that's ever sat since it was published. This guy wrote this manuscript, and this was back in like the typewriters were super fancy days, right? And I think he hand wrote his first transcript, and then his apartment burned. And this is like a 400-page book. And instead of giving up, he rewrote the entire book. And it's all just about determination and diligence, and like, you have everything that you need to be wherever you want to be, but you have to want to be there bad enough. And so it took me a whole year to get through that book because it's very like old language. Like, it was a rough read.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he put it at the back of the book. But he said in his book, like, books should be used for knowledge. So if you ever find yourself getting bored in a book or not understanding, or it's fluffed, there's a lot of newer books I found that are fluffed.
Yeah.
A lot of the old school books, the author didn't care if it was 50 pages.
Right.
If 50 pages got their point across, then that's what it was. Now it's like, oh, it has to be, 200 to 400 pages to be a New York Times bestseller.
The publisher says.
Right, exactly.
You need this many.
And so his tip was read the first sentence and the last sentence of a paragraph and move on. And if you don't understand where they got from here, from A to B, then read the middle. And so there's been a few books this year that I used that technique on because I'm like, the title says it should have good information. And the author says, the author that wrote it, I should have information I could grab from this person of high standing. And the book sucked. And so now when I finish those books, I flip them spine side in and they still go on the shelf.
Right.
Because maybe it was just the writing style that I didn't agree with.
Right.
And I'm going to pull everything I can out of that book. I'm going to finish the book, but I don't need to read and agonize over every single word of that book because it should be teaching me. If it's not teaching me, then it's wasting my time, and my time is precious because there's only so much of it. And so we've got a few books that are kind of
well, and I think too
turned around on the shelves.
Part of that is, you could be reading this in a season that's not meant for you.
Right.
Because, there are things that you're maybe reading about that they're either, you can't apply them right now, and so they seem...
past them.
Right. They seem irrelevant, or you can't understand it because it's like you haven't been through this yet. So I think that there's a lot of stuff that's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with stopping because I've stopped reading books before. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, maybe you go and try to pick back up, and maybe now I can read it. Mm-hmm. But and sometimes
I figured out where to read too, because part of me always felt weird that I can't just read in silence. Like, I feel like I should be able to. That's how you're supposed to read, right? No, I need music going in the background. I find I read best in a body of water. I know that's super weird, but like the bath or the pool, I retain information a lot better when there's other sensory things happening. I read a lot this summer at Louis in Edmond. I like their bartenders, and they'll leave me alone and just make sure my soda stays filled. So I'd go up there and read for 4 hours, because there's this outside auditory noise. But to just sit in the living room without a record playing or without music going, there's no way that I could. Because again, my brain thrives in a little chaos. So I have to create a little chaos if I'm going to be able to sit down and read front to back a whole book.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, I pick most of my things based off of, where do I currently feel like I have a gap? So whether that's, I'll pick podcasts out this way. If it's something that Because, I mean, there's some podcasts that I used to really enjoy that I no longer do because I've outgrown it. Mm-hmm. And it's not because they're still not super relevant or entertaining, but maybe they got too political, maybe they got too... there's a couple of them that I was really disappointed with that they do a lot of repeat and just play old episodes. It's like, just don't play an episode, because I get excited because it just says, there's a new episode, and it's like, they'll start out saying like, oh, it'll start out like a new one that says, oh, we hope that y'all enjoy this great episode from 2017, and it's like, what? And so there's a lot of those ones that I've now outgrown, and I can just even tell from the titles, that's like, I have no interest in hearing from this person or from, and sometimes I can be a little closed-minded, but I think also it's knowing, like, I know this person, I've listened to some of their stuff before. It's not anything I want to spend the next hour diving into. And then sometimes it's, do I just want to be entertained, or do I want to learn? But I typically will pick stuff, and especially with books, on either from a recommendation or from, I have a gap where I would like to learn more about this, and then I just so happen to be listening to podcasts and they maybe recommended or have the author on. And so that's kind of how my reading list gets chosen a lot of the times, is either, most of it's by recommendation. Every once in a while it's just by, I'll see something and this author was on years ago on the show and I forgot all about him, and now they have a new book, but...
Introducing Lay & Turner Law Firm, Oklahoma's premier boutique law firm. Whether you're navigating complex immigration laws, starting a business, buying or selling property, planning your estate, or facing criminal charges, their dedicated team is here to fight for your rights. With a deep understanding of Oklahoma's legal landscape, Lay & Turner provide personalized solutions tailored to your unique situation. Contact Lay & Turner Law Firm today and let the people's attorney represent you. For more information about Lay Turner, there's a link below this episode.
But yeah, I think that's the other thing is I enjoy just facts, so to your point of...
And I'm not.
Right, well, I just mean, like, to your point that if it's 50 pages, but that's what all the information is, that's fine. But it's funny, because if you go and look now, and this is another, like, thing about me and my personality is I notice a lot of things. Go look at an antique store or wherever they sell vintage books, and you'll see them varying from, half an inch thick to 2.5, 3 inches thick. And it's not that, all the ones that are super thin are about this, or they can vary, and you can just look at a shelf lined with hundreds of old books, like from the, call it 60s or 70s and latter, and you can sit there and see, like, there are all kinds of varying thicknesses of books. Then go to, like, a Barnes & Noble and look at the new books, and 90% of them are all within 40 pages of each other. And I think that...
Well, what's funny is, even still, a lot of those are still only really 150 pages long. It's just they included an epilogue and an acknowledgement, and then they
also
obviously
by this author.
Right. They also have the index, which they have to do because they're citing their sources, but then they'll have also by this author, about this author. So now the book is 400 pages. Look, I'm
right.
like, well, you only had 100. What's wrong with having 150 pages of hard packing truth?
Yeah.
Or ideology, like...
It probably boils down to the tooling of the machines and the shipping.
Like, we don't turn our printers on for less than 400
Well, I
pages.
just mean, like, the binders and stuff. They're probably like, well, we have to retool if that means that we're doing a book that goes, this book is 180 pages and this one's 250. I don't know how those machines all work, but that's just my analytical brain thinks you would have to retool the machines, or they're separate machines, multiple machines for different ones. So it lets everybody hit the same number of pages, because sometimes they're just blank pages in the front or the back. But also, I think, so much of our commerce is also, just side note, driven by shipping. So, how many books can we fit in a box? If the books are this thick, then we have to change our boxes. So how can we keep it consistent, and how many of those square boxes can we fit inside of this box that can go in the shipping container that can then go on the, So, I mean, that's the way a lot of stuff is just done. Because, I mean, like I said, even look at, again, go back to when we did things maybe, quote, more, inefficient. But even the height of books. Some of those books will be super tall, super deep, super, shallow. And then again, go now and they don't vary much over an inch from each other unless they're like, an encyclopedia type, whatever book or whatnot. But everything's just been regulated. Yeah. To a certain size and thickness and stuff. And it's just funny to kind of note, just because we have so many antique books and we have some newer books, to see when you go to start, putting them in the bookshelf and you put them next to each other, you're like, it's interesting to see.
When I like reading the old books too, because like we have a book club that we run. It's once a month, and I like that. I mean, you'll have some books that most people have read once in their life, like Rich Dad Poor Dad or Secrets of a Millionaire Mind. But then you've also got these other books that like half of our crowd has not even heard of, like The Richest Man in Babylon, or if they've heard of it, they've never read it.
Right.
The E-Myth Revisited,
Rework,
scared. Do It Scared. Like there's a lot. We don't go based on a New York Times best-selling list. It's literally, because I'm reading so much, it's what book do I think we want to talk about as a group.
What book was beneficial to you?
Right.
How can we then share that?
Right. And our first book club, it was just you and I. Yeah. And we still chose to have it, and we still went through the discussion questions. And that was the first time that we ever had really discussed a book. Like, we'd read the same books, but we never, sat down and, what did you pull from it? What were your thoughts? Here's what I thought. What do you see? What are your thoughts and opinions? We'd never really done that before. And so, you're like, well, do you want to keep doing it? I said, I do, because regardless if anybody shows up or not, if nobody ever shows up, this is still going to benefit us and our marriage. And so this is still a priority to me. Right. And it's going to be whatever God wants it to be. And he might only want it to be us. Yeah. Or he might want it to turn into multiple locations and they're happening all over. I don't know. Yeah. But I'm choosing to release my, my want to control everything on this one thing. I'm choosing to have no control at all. And it's just going to be whatever it's going to be. Yeah. And it's slowly growing. And we have a lot more interest online than we actually do in physical attendance. Right. And so we've been talking about, and I mean, we have more, we can see who's gone through to purchase the books, and we have more book purchases than we have attendees. And so we've even been discussing, well, do we have an online book club and the physical? I still want to physically meet. Yeah. But what if we had a secondary book that is just for the online? And so if you can't make it to the physical, or you're not in Oklahoma City, then you can still participate. And so that's an idea that we're kind of exploring. But I think books have made a dramatic impact in our life, our marriage, our businesses, for sure. I mean, the only reason why I had the audacity to look at selling a CRM is from a book. Yeah. And it wasn't even about CRMs. Right. It was about online coursework and how you should send postcards to people, because it was written in the 80s or 90s. But
take out an ad in your local paper.
Right. But I was reading this book, and this guy was just like, figure it the frick out. And I was like, okay. All right, I'm going to figure it the frick out. I'm just going to do it. What's the worst that could happen? Nobody buys, whatever. It's still something I need.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think just as I don't want to say as a society, but I think book clubs used to be such a big thing for people. And I think a lot of it just boils down to entertainment. There's so many things that you can do now that are entertaining and mindless that it's just easier to do those things,
Well, I know a lot of book clubs on novels and
because they're entertaining.
Fiction? fiction. But I don't think I've ever been invited to a business book club, right, or a financial book club, or a marketing book club,
right?
Or
because I don't think it's, again, that's college,
right?
Because I don't feel like
we're kind of choosing to look at this as like business counseling, like group counseling, because that's what it felt like last time. You know, we just, I don't know, we just explored areas that we're struggling in, and we explored struggles that we've had in our marriage, and we were very open and honest about, you know, the pitfalls that we've found in business, and it was very therapeutic. Yeah. And I look forward to that continuing and the group to grow so more people can have that kind of outlet.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we've already discussed about, I mean, we're only a couple episodes in on this one, but, you know, discussing doing a podcast book club, like I'm sure there's tons of them out there, but doing our own in a format that we like, with obviously the books that we choose that have benefited us, and having that be something that is also in tandem with the physical book club, but that, you know, again, because we understand that it's very hard, you know, to make time not only to read the book, but then to go and attend a meeting, essentially to talk about the book.
One, honestly, like the amount of pushback that you get is pretty surprising. Like any time that I have told somebody, more times than not, when I've told somebody I'm reading a book a week, I get a reaction that's either like, that's crazy, or that like,
must be so nice to have all this time on your hands.
Right. Or that they almost look at it as me thinking I'm better than everybody else that isn't reading. I'm like, no.
Right.
Never once did I say, I'm reading a book a week, so I'm not an idiot.
Right.
Like, I just said, I'm choosing to read a book a week.
Yeah.
And, like, there's not a lot of, like, that's amazing.
Right.
How's it going? What have you learned? Like, that's not the reaction that people have. Right. And so I think when somebody makes a decision to intentionally improve themselves in that way, it can be really disheartening, because you're more than likely you're going to get pushback in some way or the other. And they're probably not meaning to push back, but it's just weird. Yeah. It's weird. Yeah. And so putting yourself around other people that are also weird, it's going to help you stick with whatever that habit is that you're trying to create.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because it's so much easier. It's like with anything, it's easier to be negative than positive. And I feel like when anyone tries to improve themselves, quite frankly, it's the same thing. Like if you heard someone say, like, I go to the gym every day, you go, ugh. And I think it's kind of the same thing. Like, oh, well, it must be nice to be able to get up in the morning and go do this. And I feel like we all have a habit of, when somebody is doing something that we don't ourselves enjoy, when they are improving themselves by utilizing that thing, we tend to go, ugh.
Yeah. Well, we're very self-focused as creatures.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's all about our survival.
Right.
You know? But, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, when people that have been together for a long time, the other one starts, like, getting into shape and, like, working out or just trying to take better care of themselves. They're like, what, are you doing something? Or, like, who are you trying to get better for? It's like, for me. Mm-hmm. You know? And so I think that it's hard sometimes, because if we're not there in that journey, like when I stopped smoking, you know,
I was pissed.
You were not in that place to quit smoking, and I just decided I'm done. I'm tired of feeling like this or whatever. You know, I mean, that was a major conflict, and it felt to me like you were attacking. Like, how dare you try to be healthier? You know. And to me, I'm like, I don't understand. And so...
Well, it was my own insecurity coming out.
Yeah. But just how it's like, you know, we are very all about self-preservation. And that self-preservation could be, I'm going to preserve myself in a state of misery. And misery loves company. Mm-hmm. Because it's a lot easier to do that than to say, hey, let's hold each other accountable to get better, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, those are so much more difficult to do. Like, I mean, if we started a cookie club, like, I guarantee you I could have a dozen people there weekly to eat cookies. But you try to have a self-improvement book club, and it's crickets.
Right. Because, I mean, we advertise, like, the only books that this book club is going to read is business, financing, marketing, economics, self-help, leadership, psychology. That's it. If it's not one of those 7 types, like, don't bring a mystery recommendation in here.
Right.
It's not happening.
Yeah.
We're not interested in your novel. That's not what we're reading.
Right.
And so, and quite honestly, like, it's not a book club for recommendations.
Right. Yeah, it's a book club for people who, don't maybe know what books to read to do these kinds of things or to improve in this area. Right. And so it's literally just, this is what we have read, or this is what we have gotten from these things, so let's talk about it. And here's how it benefited us. And so, I mean, unfortunately, it's harder to get people to do those kinds of improvements, but I think, just being consistent, I think it'll eventually come around, or just, the medium will change. And, I think our book clubs right now just kind of more consist of date night than book club. We just have a topic to talk about, so we're not talking about the kids.
And sometimes there's other people.
Yeah. And so, but I think maybe, by changing the medium in which that we're delivering the book club, I think may change some of the engagement. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think that it'll grow. I just think that it'll grow differently than what, maybe we originally thought.
Right. So, of the books that you've read recently, what's one that's made the biggest impact?
So, The Richest Man in Babylon was great, and then the one
by George Clason.
And then what's the one that I just finished it today?
The Prodigal God?
The Prodigal God.
Yeah. That was by Timothy Keller.
Yeah, I've heard that story. I grew up hearing that story.
You never hear the back half of it.
And then just having a different mindset and a different view of it completely, just kind of changes that and gives you a whole different perspective. So I think those two, and those are two very short, concise, to the point.
Yeah.
I think
you can finish both in a day.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a stretch unless you have 5. I mean, so to listen to it was 5 hours. So one of them was 2 hours and one of them was 3. But yeah, I mean, totally doable.
Sorry, I didn't mean both in one day.
Oh,
you could finish one book a day.
Yeah, because they're both, each one was...
Even physically reading it?
Yeah.
Like, Prodigal God took me 4 hours. It's gone in an afternoon.
Yeah.
And The Richest Man in Babylon finished in 4 hours.
Yeah.
I split that one over 2 days, but yeah, those are both great ones.
Yeah. What about you?
So Love Does Always.
Sure.
That's always going to be one of my top.
Bob Goff.
Bob Goff. One Day I'll Make It to Tom Sawyer's Island. That's his office. And I think I'm not done with it yet, but I'm really excited to finish Rework by Jason Fried, I think is the author's name. But it's been phenomenal so far. I'm only about halfway through.
Yeah.
And I think the other one that made like a major impact in how I think about business structure is The E-Myth Revisited.
Yeah. That's a classic.
Yeah, that was a really good one.
Yeah. It's been a year. It's been probably 2 years since I've read that one. So I'm probably due for a refresh.
Yeah. Well, it's one of our book months.
Book club months. Next month or something. 2 months.
Next month.
November, October.
November.
Yeah.
October is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But one that gave, I think, a big impact to both of us, because I think this is one of, like, the domino that kind of fell to let you jump from your 9 to 5, was Power Your Profits by Susie Crater. And it literally breaks down how to make a business plan and how to structure your payments, like how you need to price yourself.
Right.
It talks about how to goal cast and how to. It's a really good book for anybody thinking about starting a business or within their first 2 years of business, and even if you've been in business a long time, because even though most business plans you're not going to stick to. It's not about sticking to the business plan, in my opinion. And the author might have a completely different outtake on this. But a business plan is not there for you to stick to it. A business plan is there to show you possibilities.
Right.
And give you belief in yourself that you can accomplish it. And then it's just doing every day the little tasks that need to be done that move that needle forward. But, like, I don't like goals necessarily, right? Like, I need to hit this by this. Don't like it. Not going to do it. I have a goal. Like, I know what I want our revenue to be at next. Now, my hope would be that soon, but I don't know. That could be 2 years. Because for me, when I put a timeline to it, I get desperate and I get pushy and I get manipulative.
Yeah.
Just like every other human being. Fight or flight.
Right.
I'm not going to put us in a fight or flight situation because I want to run these companies in a specific way. But Power Your Profits by Susie Crater.
Yeah.
Really awesome book.
Yeah. Because I think that it's, and mainly because I know I've read a couple books on goal setting, and I think that what you learn from that, there's a big misunderstanding that, every goal should have expiration date. It's like, that's not true.
Right.
Because I think that the goal can be to do, whether that's to lose a certain amount of weight, whether that's to hit revenue goals, whether that's to have a better marriage. Like, how do you put a time frame on, I want our marriage to be better?
Right.
What?
Yeah.
So
that's not a smart goal. That's
right. That's a setting yourself up to fail goal. But I think that setting goals that are healthy, in that my goal is to take one step towards the direction of the outcome I want every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be, I'm going to read one inspirational quote every day. My goal is to become an inspirational speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I can't say, like, I want to be on a stage in 12 months.
Right.
But if I want to be an inspirational speaker, what am I going to do? I'm going to make one TikTok or one short form video every week for just 30 seconds, just to start breaking that mold.
Mm-hmm.
And with the ambition to work up to stages.
Right.
And so I think that those kind of goals, and it's not even about, like, well, I need to make sure they're realistic so I can hit them. It's like, no, you need to make sure that they're doable with your schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that that's where a lot of people mess up is, they set these lofty goals, and there's really no way for you to accomplish those in reality in your time frame of your day.
Thanks for tuning in to the Velvet Ventures. If you'd like more information about who we are, what we do, or you want to follow us or any of our companies, then feel free to check out the link below. Other than that, thank you so much to our sponsors for making this episode possible. See you next time.